The reconnaissance photograph showed something impossible. The analyst stared at the image for 20 minutes before calling his superior. Rows of twin-engine fighters lined up on the airfield at Guadalcanal. Too many. Far too many for what the intelligence estimates had predicted. December 1942. Tokyo, Japan. The Imperial Japanese Navy Intelligence Section had been tracking American fighter deployments across the Pacific with methodical precision. Each aircraft type cataloged. Each squadron accounted for. The mathematics were straightforward. Production estimates matched deployment numbers, until they stopped matching. The P-38 Lightning, that strange twin-boomed fighter the Americans had deployed in small numbers earlier in the year, was appearing everywhere at once. Over New Guinea, over the Solomons, flying escort missions that should have been impossible given the reported production capacity. Someone wrote a note in the margin of the intelligence summary. Verify aircraft identification, possible counting error. But there was no counting error, and the identification was correct. The P-38s were real, numerous, and multiplying faster than Japanese intelligence could explain. When the P-38 Lightning first appeared in American service, Japanese military analysts paid close attention. The design was unusual. 2 engines mounted on separate booms. A central nacelle housing the pilot and the entire armament package. 4 50 caliber machine guns and 1 20mm cannon concentrated in the nose. No synchronization issues. No convergence problems. Every round went exactly where the pilot aimed. The range was concerning. Over 1,500 miles with drop tanks. That meant the Americans could strike targets previously considered safe. Could escort bombers deeper into Japanese-controlled territory. Could maintain air superiority over vast oceanic distances. Japanese intelligence officers understood what this meant strategically, but they also understood production realities. Complex aircraft required time to build. The P-38 was not a simple design. 2 Allison engines requiring precise maintenance. Turbochargers that needed specialized manufacturing. Counter-rotating propellers to eliminate torque. Sophisticated hydraulic systems throughout. German intelligence had shared their assessments. Multi-engine fighters were expensive, resource-intensive, difficult to produce in large quantities. The Japanese agreed with this analysis. Initial intelligence estimates predicted the Americans might produce 1,200 to 1,500 P-38s over the course of the war, enough to equip specialist units, long-range reconnaissance squadrons, perhaps a few fighter groups for specific missions requiring extended range. This number felt reasonable, manageable. The Zero and other Japanese fighters could maintain overall numerical superiority despite the technological advantages of individual American aircraft. The estimate was based on sound reasoning, on understanding industrial limitations, on historical production patterns for complex aircraft. It was also completely wrong. By mid-1943, Japanese pilots were reporting P-38 encounters with disturbing frequency, not just in one theater, everywhere. The twin-boomed fighters appeared over targets that were supposed to be beyond their range, in numbers that exceeded every intelligence projection. American bomber formations that once arrived unescorted now came with P-38s overhead. Missions that should have been vulnerable suddenly became deadly for Japanese interceptors. The mathematics stopped making sense. But the deeper problem was not the mathematics. It was the fundamental assumption underlying every calculation. The assumption that American aircraft production followed the same rules as Japanese aircraft production. That assumption was about to be systematically demolished. The first anomaly appeared in reconnaissance reports from early 1943. Aerial photography of Lockheed's Burbank facility showed expansion. New buildings, additional assembly structures. The plant footprint was growing at a pace that seemed excessive for projected P-38 production needs. Japanese intelligence noted the expansion but interpreted it cautiously. Perhaps the Americans were diversifying production. Maybe other aircraft types would be built alongside the P-38, or the expansion represented optimistic planning that would never reach full utilization. The explanation was logical. Facilities often exceeded actual production requirements, except the facility kept expanding, and the P-38s kept appearing. By summer 1943, Japanese units were reporting consistent encounters with P-38s across multiple fronts simultaneously. The 475th Fighter Group in New Guinea, the 347th Fighter Group in the Solomons, additional squadrons providing bomber escort over Rabaul. The numbers did not add up. If American production matched Japanese estimates, these deployments would have exhausted available aircraft. Yet combat losses were being replaced. New units were forming. The P-38 force was not diminishing, it was growing. Intelligence officers began requesting updated assessments. The original production estimates needed revision, but revision required understanding what had changed. What had the Americans done differently? The answer started emerging through multiple sources: prisoner interrogations, captured documents, diplomatic communications from neutral countries. Lockheed had redesigned its entire production process. The P-38, initially a hand-built aircraft requiring skilled technicians, had been systematically re-engineered for mass production. Components standardized. Sub-assemblies manufactured by contractors across the United States. Final assembly concentrated in Burbank using methods borrowed from automotive production. 22 separate contractors were building P-38 components by 1944. Wings manufactured in one facility. Engine assemblies in another. Hydraulic systems, landing gear, cockpit instruments, each piece built to precise specifications then shipped to Burbank for final integration. The assembly line operated with industrial efficiency. Workers who had never built aircraft before learned single tasks, repetitive motions, specific procedures performed hundreds of times until they became automatic. The production timeline compressed. What once took months now took weeks, then days. Japanese intelligence officers read these reports with growing unease, because if the reports were accurate, if the Americans had genuinely transformed aircraft production into an industrial process, then the original estimates were not just wrong. They were catastrophically insufficient. The confirmation came through the most reliable source possible: shot-down aircraft. Each P-38 carried a manufacturer's plate with a production sequence number. Japanese salvage teams began collecting these plates, recording the numbers, tracking the progression. The numbers told a story that intelligence estimates had failed to predict. Production sequence numbers climbed steadily through 1943. By early 1944, they were in the 5,000s. By mid-1944, approaching 7,000. The sequence continued upward at a pace that suggested something extraordinary was happening in Burbank. One intelligence analyst created a chart, plotted the sequence numbers against time, drew a projection line extending into 1945. The line suggested total production approaching 10,000 aircraft. He showed the chart to 3 separate superior officers. Each time, he was told the projection must be incorrect, that he had made a calculation error, that the sequence numbers must include prototype variants or training aircraft or some other category that inflated the true combat production total. But the sequence numbers were accurate. The projection was conservative. The pattern repeated across every intelligence category. Deployment numbers that should have declined remained stable. Loss rates that should have depleted American fighter strength had no lasting effect. Units reported destroyed in combat reappeared weeks later at full strength. The P-38 became something more than a tactical problem. It became evidence of a systemic miscalculation. Japanese naval officers understood carrier-based aircraft production. They understood the limitations of specialized military manufacturing. They understood how long it took to train workers, how carefully quality had to be maintained, how production bottlenecks developed when complex systems required integration. The Americans had apparently bypassed all of these limitations. Lockheed's Burbank plant reached peak production in early 1945. 432 P-38s manufactured in a single month. 14 aircraft per day. One Lightning rolling off the assembly line every 107 minutes. The number was reported through multiple intelligence channels. Each time it was questioned, verified, questioned again. Because 432 aircraft per month meant the original Japanese intelligence estimate for total P-38 production was being exceeded every 3 months. The implications cascaded through strategic planning. If the Americans could produce P-38s at this rate, what about other aircraft? The P-51 Mustang was appearing in growing numbers. The P-47 Thunderbolt. The B-29 Superfortress program represented an even more ambitious production commitment. Japanese intelligence had been tracking individual trees while missing the forest. The forest was American industrial capacity operating at a scale that had no historical precedent. That had no equivalent in Japanese experience. That transformed military production from a specialized craft into a standardized industrial process. One symbol appeared repeatedly in intelligence summaries. A small notation. Production capacity exceeds defensive requirements. The notation was bureaucratic language for an uncomfortable truth. The Americans were not building aircraft to match Japanese production. They were building aircraft to overwhelm it, to make individual tactical victories irrelevant through sheer numerical superiority. The P-38 production numbers proved this strategy was working. By late 1944, Japanese pilots reported that P-38s appeared in greater numbers after heavy combat than before it. That shooting down 3 Lightnings meant encountering 4 more the following week. That the American fighter force was not being depleted by attrition. It was growing despite attrition. This should not have been possible, but it was happening, because Lockheed had built 10,038 P-38 Lightnings by the time production ended in 1945. 10,000 aircraft of a design that Japanese intelligence had assessed as too complex for mass production, too expensive for high-volume manufacturing, too specialized to be built in quantities that would affect strategic balance. Every one of those assessments had been technically correct by conventional standards, and every one had been operationally irrelevant. The truth behind the intelligence failure was not incompetence. Japanese analysts had accurately evaluated P-38 production using established frameworks, using historical data, using methodologies that had worked for assessing other nations' military capabilities. The problem was that the Americans were not following established frameworks. Lockheed's transformation of P-38 production required reconceptualizing what aircraft manufacturing meant. It required breaking the assumption that complexity demanded craftsmanship. That quality required individual skill. That aircraft had to be built by aircraft specialists. The Americans had decided aircraft could be built by anyone, if the process was designed correctly, if the engineering was precise enough, if the standardization was complete. This was not a modification of existing production methods. It was a fundamentally different approach to industrial warfare. Japanese intelligence failed to predict P-38 production levels not because they lacked information. They had reconnaissance photographs. They had prisoner statements. They had captured documents detailing American industrial planning. They failed because the information described something outside their conceptual framework, something that seemed impossible even when directly observed. The assumption that aircraft production had inherent limits was so deeply embedded that evidence contradicting it was interpreted as error, as exaggeration, as temporary wartime propaganda rather than systematic reality. Even when the evidence became overwhelming, response options were limited. Could Japan have matched American production? No. The industrial infrastructure did not exist. The raw materials were insufficient. The transportation networks were vulnerable. The skilled workforce was already fully committed. Could tactics have compensated? Not at this scale. Individual Japanese pilots were often highly skilled. Aircraft like the Zero remained formidable in skilled hands. But tactical excellence cannot overcome 20-1 numerical disadvantage sustained month after month. Could the war's outcome have changed? Not once American industrial mobilization reached full capacity. The P-38 production numbers were not an anomaly. They were representative of the entire American war economy. The failure was structural, built into assumptions about how wars were fought, how industrial capacity translated to military power, how production limitations constrained strategic options. Those assumptions worked until they encountered an opponent who had eliminated the limitations. There is a tendency to remember World War II aircraft through individual stories. The aces who flew them, the missions they completed, the tactical innovations they enabled, the technological features that made them distinctive. The P-38 Lightning fits this pattern. Fork-tailed Devil, 2 planes, 1 pilot, the aircraft that shot down Yamamoto, the Mount of America's top aces. But beneath the individual stories was something more fundamental, something that Japanese intelligence observed but never fully grasped until too late. 10,000 aircraft represent more than tactical capability. They represent industrial transformation, the ability to make complexity simple, to make scarcity abundant, to convert design excellence into production volume without sacrificing either. Lockheed built the first P-38 in 1939, a prototype, hand-assembled by specialists, every component carefully fitted, every system meticulously tested. 6 years later, they were building 14 P-38s every day using workers who had never seen an aircraft factory before the war. That transformation, repeated across every category of military equipment, decided the Pacific War's outcome more certainly than any battle. Japanese intelligence documented this transformation, filed reports, updated estimates, tracked the numbers as they climbed beyond every prediction. But documentation is not the same as comprehension. And comprehension came too late to matter. The P-38 production numbers were not hidden. They were visible to anyone willing to accept what the evidence showed. That American industrial capacity operated by different rules, that those rules made conventional production limits obsolete, that warfare had entered an era where victory belonged to whoever could build faster than the enemy could destroy. Japan learned this lesson through observation, through combat losses that were replaced faster than they could inflict them, through intelligence reports that documented an industrial capability so vast it seemed fictional. By the time the lesson was learned, 10,000 P-38 Lightnings had already rolled off the assembly lines, and Japanese spies had never seen it coming. Consider how intelligence failure shapes outcomes. When accurate information exists but falls outside your conceptual framework, when evidence contradicts your assumptions about what is possible, how do you recognize truth before it becomes irreversible strategic disadvantage? This video is based on historical records, expert analysis, and documented sources. Some interpretations are simplified for storytelling clarity.